Hi, people. So, first of all, thank you to all of those who came by the last live stream. It was quite a good session, even though it was quite late. Um, I never time my live streams for the simple reason that there's going to be a situation where nobody cannot, well, not everyone could be available at the same time. So, I think having it spontaneous is actually more practical. If you miss one, don't worry, I'll be doing them quite regularly. Different times just to give everyone a chance to come along. The point of the live streams really is just to engage with me, to ask me questions, to raise issues of your own, maybe some comment on a video I've made. Basically, it's an opportunity for me to engage with my subscribers. I do try to reply to comments on videos, but I don't get around to all of them. So it's also an opportunity. Maybe if you have a question, you can raise it in that live stream. So thanks again for that. Like I said, I'll be doing them periodically, but I'm not going to say a specific time for two reasons. For the aforementioned reason, which is that different time zones, different people are awake, and so on. Also, myself, my own structure is a little bit unstable at the moment, so I don't want to set a time and then let people down. Yeah, I might should drink a warm water because bit of a sore throat, and this is a technique the Chinese use actually, quite effective actually. I used to get that in Chinese restaurants, like I'd ask for water and they bring warm water, and I always thought that's strange because in the West we don't tend to drink warm water, but I imagine it was something to do with that, particularly with spicier food to aid digestion. I'm not sure, but it is quite effective actually with a sore throat. I'm not using anything else. Well, I had some paracetamol last night, but anyway, I just want to talk briefly, somewhat briefly, about this situation with the government and the Conservative Party because really, um, I was going to say they're in a mess, but a Conservative friend of mine said it's not a mess, it's a meltdown, and that's coming from a Tory voter. Um, they're in a bad way, but I really think a lot of this is self-inflicted. Now, the Prime Minister, on a human level, I have an inkling of sympathy for her because she's under enormous pressure, and no matter what she does at this point, she's going to get criticised. So I have an inkling of human sympathy for her. But it is minor because she was warned about this budget. Her and Quartine saw eye to eye on this. This wasn't like the Chancellor versus the Prime Minister. They both pushed this. Quartine lost his job. Some have interpreted that as Truss throwing him under the bus because after all, she gave the green light to the budget. She approved of it. She went along with it, and she appointed the man. So there's going to be personal issues as well. Apparently, they're good friends. So I don't know if behind the scenes that's going to cause some tensions. Um, Quartang handled it the only way he could, which is to accept the, to just resign. But it must have been embarrassing because literally 24 hours before in New York City, he was saying 100% he would stay in the job. But this is honestly an embarrassing situation. We have now had four chancellors in 1 year. I think that's a record. Um, I'm pretty sure it's a record if my history serves me correct. So Rishi Sunak, Nadine Sahawi, um, Kwasi Kwarteng, and now Jeremy Hunt. Um, I saw a meme saying who will be November's chancellor because it has literally seemed like there's been a different chancellor every month. Um, when Sahawi left, it was said, oh, he had one of the shortest chancellorships. Now Kwarteng's even shorter. In fact, the only chancellor to have had a shorter tenure was, I believe, Ian MacLeod back in 1970, and that's only because he died. So actually, Kwarteng has the shortest chancellorship in which he had to resign. MacLeod's was 1 month in the early 70s under the Heath government, I believe. Um, but that's in itself not a good situation. Jeremy Hunt is obviously a political heavyweight. He's been foreign secretary. He was long-serving health secretary. I think he's quite a capable politician. I mean, of course, he has his detractors, as every senior politician does. But I think he's quite capable. I think he's smart. But honestly, I'm not sure if changing jobs at this point is going to be enough for the Tories. Hunt wants a very different direction, and apparently Downing Street's now in this deflective mode, and the Chancellor has said this that he's not really in charge. Truss is still the boss. But that's the Westminster speculation at the moment that really Jeremy Hunt's a de facto Prime Minister. Now that conclusion's reached because historically, Chancellor of the Exchequer has de facto been the second most powerful position in the country. The position of Deputy Prime Minister is not actually a formal position. It's purely at the discretion of individual Prime Ministers. Um, there was periods Tony Blair didn't have any deputy, although John Prescott largely served as that. I don't think Brown had any deputy. Um, Cameron didn't have a deputy. So it's, well, no, that's not true. He had Nick Clegg, but the last part of his premiership he didn't. So this is purely at the discretion of the Prime Minister. So Therese Coffey may be the Deputy Prime Minister, but really, historically, it's been in the hands of the Chancellor. So there's nothing unusual about a Chancellor and the Prime Minister seeing things differently, but this is radically different. This is radically different. So I imagine Truss has had to grit her teeth and swallow a lot of pride basically in the last 48 hours for her survival. There's two schools of thought from what I could see within Tory ranks. One is that she is a liability now. Her entire program has been seen as a failure. It's made the markets nervous. It's tumbled the pound. We're in a serious situation, and she's lost her chancellor. So she's the problem. She should go. Of course, that in itself could jitter the markets because it would show the British political system right now is unstable. For a long time, countries like Italy and Japan seem to change prime minister every month. It looks like we're even now at a point where we could be getting there, which I think would be a very big problem. So, should Truss go? I honestly don't know. I will say this: are Tories clambering for Johnson to come back? I think that's a serious mistake. One of my conservative contacts said, "Well, like him or not, he's got charisma, but charisma doesn't cover up the sleaze." And I've said time and time again, I think Boris Johnson's one of the most corrupt figures to occupy Downing Street in recent years. Because it isn't just Partygate; it was one scandal after another. And to me, um, when those in power are not following their own rules, that is sheer abuse of power. Now you have people like Nadine Dorris who are just cultists. They just basically say, "Oh, they've betrayed Boris." I noticed the Daily Express the other day. It was one of the few papers defending the Prime Minister. Even the Mail's turned on her, but the Express was saying the vultures are circling. Well, they used similar, quite inflammatory language around the coup against Johnson. But that was justified. Those backbenchers knew it was damaging to them. And, they got vilified by the Johnson loyalists as traitors and as, um, I think that no one individual is more important than the electorate. No one individual is more important than ethics in public life. So if an MP thinks that their leader is corrupt, they have a duty to act on it. But they run the risk of being called a traitor and called all these names by the cultists like Nadine Dorris, and that's what I call it. I don't think it's quite as bad as Trumpian level. Hasn't been any violence or anything like that, but it is sort of this blind loyalty to one man. Oh, he has charisma. Well, does that cover up his track record of lies, track record of corruption? Yes, he achieved things as prime minister. His support for Ukraine was extremely important and to be commended, something that's continued under Truss. And he got Brexit done. Whether you vote for it or not, that is something he campaigned on. But I don't think the sleaze and the corruption is a trivial matter at all. I think it taps into mistrust at the very top, and I think a lot of people see through it now. So bringing back Boris Johnson to me would be just being tone deaf to the public mood. Of course, there'll be people out there who support him. I'm not saying it's a whole public that would be against that, but I think it would be a serious mistake. I think the Tories collectively, not just Liz Truss, the entire party, frankly, needs to swallow some humble pie. I think, as Andrew Marr put it, um, some humble pie with a big dose of grovel gravy. He's right though, because right now the Tories come across as arrogant. They come across as they're simply born to rule. Um, there were a few people like Kimmy Badenoch saying we need to move on from Brexit. There were a few outsiders in that leadership race who were sort of tapping into doing something differently. But collectively, I think they need to accept that just because they're the party of government doesn't mean that they can be complacent. And I think a lot of backbenchers know this. I think a lot of backbenchers know that there's a very strong chance now. Pretty much every Tory seat is in danger. That is how much the rot has set in. Um, I don't like the Tory party, but I don't relish any of this. I don't think it's good for the country at all. There will be some people on the left who are enjoying this. They think this is wonderful because the Tories are getting embarrassed and it's damaging. But, they should put the country first and consider this isn't good for the country. Um, so it shouldn't be about sort of petty party politics. It should be about, well, this is not good. The government is in a bad way. Um, the ironic thing is, Labour is doing very well, but I think a lot of it may simply be because Tories are doing so badly. At this point, Starmer arguably doesn't even need to do very much. If there was an election tomorrow, Labour would probably win. Of course, no leader can be complacent. Um, at the moment, I would consider voting Labour. Consider it. The one big thing that puts me off Labour, perhaps more than anything else, is the wokeism and their attitude to it, their fixation with identity politics. I think it's completely toxic. And I think in that regard, it's one of the few areas the Tories are more in touch with the public mood. Um, but, I never vote on one issue, even a big issue. For me, I weigh up a lot of factors. Now, Labour is ahead of the public mood on the economy, ahead of the public mood on the fuel costs. Truss offered support, but only after Starmer did. Um, I think that, and as for the U-turn she's done, like I say, this is a problem for a prime minister. It's the right U-turn, but unfortunately, it's still damaged her credibility because um, I think sometimes U-turns are not a bad thing. We shouldn't always condemn U-turns if it's if it's justified. But the problem is when you have a prime minister who's dogmatic and does a U-turn, it's not just because she sort of thought, well, yes, this was a mistake. I was wrong to do that. It's because she kind of mistake got exposed. She still has not apologized, incidentally, which I think is shoddy leadership and it shows arrogance. She has not apologized. Just like Boris Johnson's resignation speech, there wasn't much of an apology there. There's an arrogance with the Tories, and a lot of people, I think, are starting to see it. Um, so I really think they need to show a lot of humility and accept that this is, the public are not angry because they ousted Boris. That's a delusion. I think the public are angry at a government that isn't working, a government that's corrupt, and a government that's arrogant. Joe Biden was asked about this. He had an ice cream and he said he was against trickle down economics. So, even our allies are speaking out. I think really it's difficult to know because if the Tories change their leader and therefore prime minister again, well, firstly, one thing is absolutely certain: they cannot have a long drawn out leadership contest. That would be a mess. The last one was too long. I agree with those who said it was too long, including the current Foreign Secretary James Cleverly. It was too drawn out. I don't know why they had to take so long over that. Of course, choosing the leader and prime minister is not a small thing. It shouldn't be done overnight, but I don't know why, for example, Sunak and Truss had to battle out for over a month. That should have been condensed to at least 2 weeks or less. Battle out for over a month, and I know the argument is so they could travel the country and everyone could get a say. You could do something like visit the four nations or different regions or something. I think it could be condensed. So that's one thing that's very important. But having a long, drawn out leadership contest with Liz Truss as a lame duck prime minister, that won't reassure anyone. Um, so at most it should be 2 or 3 weeks at most. Um, have one debate and be done with it. Just to have this thing drawn out, I think would be a mistake. But of course, they have to take it seriously. Will it happen? Well, Andrew Marr's a smart guy and he's a top journalist. He predicted that Truss is on her way out. He could be wrong. Um, I think a lot of Tories who are nervous, they think if she stays on, she's a lame duck prime minister at this point. But if she goes, that in itself looks unstable. Um, because she would be the shortest serving prime minister by far. I mean, George Canning served 119 days in office in 1827, then died. And immediately after him, Viscount Godric served a little longer, 144 days, and then resigned. Truss has so far served 40 days. But even if she lasts a few more weeks, um, it's just incredible. I have an inkling of sympathy because, she is probably well aware that she now faces the ignominy of that record of having the shortest premiership in British history. Um, but a lot of it is of her own making, just like Boris's troubles were of his own making. So I really think that the Tories what they need to do is definitely not bring back Johnson. I think Sunak would be an obvious choice. He was runner up, and a lot of Tories, I think, regret not choosing him. Um, you need stability. You need someone who is going to, stay in power. Even if Labour win the election, at least 2 years. We can't have this rotating door of prime ministers because it's not something that has historically happened in this country. So it's going to make our international allies think, what's going on in Britain? Um, I'm quite concerned about it, actually. Having said that, um, I've mentioned that with party politics, it tends to be generational. So the Tories are in power for a generation, then Labour, then the Tories. So 12 years now, that's coming up to a generation sort of time frame. So maybe it's time to give Labour a chance. I mean, New Labour under Blair and Brown had some significant achievements. Starmer's not New Labour, but I don't think he is. I've no concerns about his worldview. Let me be clear about that. I'm quite comfortable with it. I think he has his compass right when it comes to Russia, China, Ukraine. I don't think that there'll be much difference in the Ukraine policy, which is good. Domestically, I think he's quite sound on the economy, issues around that. Like I say, my big concern with Starmer is the identity politics, and if they get into power, we could see some of that stuff coming in. We could see even worse than it already is in universities. That would be appalling, and I am concerned about that. So that would be, if I have a Labour candidate knocking on my door, I'll tell them quite honestly that's my concern. Um, Crime. Again, the Tories are meant to be the party of law and order. This is the thing. The Tories talk tough, but they haven't really delivered. Sentencing continues to be soft. Um, the Ministry of Justice says that, oh, well, we've an independent judiciary, we can't interfere. But this is sort of a contradiction because they set the laws and there is a lot of overlap there, actually. So it's not wholly independent. The ministers cannot weigh into individual cases and say this should be the sentence. So they can't tell judges what to do in that sense. But they are the ones who set the laws. They have the power, for example, to increase sentencing guidelines, and they won't. So I don't really buy this argument the Ministry of Justice has said to me that they've got no power in this regard. Yeah, no power to influence the judiciary or to rather, yeah, to they're denying that there's overlap, and I think there is. Um, anyway, what do you think? Should the Tories get rid of Liz Truss? Should they get a new leader? Should it be Boris Johnson? I think that would be a serious mistake for the reasons I've laid out. Johnson may be popular, but I don't think giving him a second run, given all the corruption that's happened, I think I'll put it this way, even if he has the support, what does that say about British democracy? When you have a man who's a proven liar, who has engaged in criminal behaviour because he violated his government's own laws, his own rules, um, as does Sunak, incidentally. The Tories right now are so corrupt. Not to say every individual is, but the party, I think, as a whole, is pretty corrupt, morally and literally. Um, and it's this kind of infighting that's going on. This thing about loyalty that they have. What they need to understand is the wider public. doesn't really care about loyalty to individual leaders. What the public cares about is efficiency. But also, I think the public cares about sleaze. And maybe this is just me, but I think a lot of people out there are tired of the arrogance. So, yeah, that's the options they have. Get rid of Truss, risk another divisive leadership contest and uncertainty around that, or keep a lame duck prime minister on. Truss would have to do something extraordinary to rebound trust in her own MPs. Um, her communication is, they used to call Theresa May, I thought somewhat unfairly, the Maybot. May had much better communication skills than Truss. Truss has no communication skills. She's wooden. And I don't think this is a shallow point, actually. I don't think this is just personality politics. I think this does tap into how you resonate with the public. And she just seems like that parody that's online, Live Truss. Um, that comedian really hits the nail on the head when it comes to impersonations of the Prime Minister because unfortunately she just seems out of depth. Even though she was quite an accomplished Foreign Secretary, she just seems like she does not want to talk to the press, and she only took 4 questions the other day. No apology. Um, and it's not a good situation. So whoever the Tories choose, if they go down this path, they might keep Truss on. They might keep Truss on and think it's too big a risk to change Prime Minister. If they do go down the path of choosing a new leader, they'll need someone with a bit. They don't have to have a personality like Boris Johnson, but they do need to have a bit. They need to have better communication skills, and I think Sunak did. They need to take a different direction. Probably that it would be wise to keep the chancellor. It would be insane to change another chancellor, so they should keep Hunt on as chancellor. Probably keep the other appointments that Truss made. It's usually when there's a new prime minister that all the great offices of state change. I think at this point, you'd have to keep on all those roles for some stability. So someone who has some consistency in that sense, but also a change of direction and not. And I also think being an outsider from Johnson and Truss, Sunak wasn't an outsider, but some condemned him for resigning. But the same argument could be made. Why did Truss stay on as foreign secretary when she was running against the prime minister? She said, "Well, I have a job to get on with." But her whole position was in my view, contradictory. She said she was loyal to Boris, yet she put her name down in the leadership contest to replace him. That's if she really believed that it was some sort of betrayal. Um, why did she put her name down in the leadership contest? So I think a lot of people will see a lot of egos at play in all of this. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think the Tories should do going forward?